Diana directs FCNL's foreign policy lobbying team. She also leads FCNL's Dismantling Racism and Militarism project, something many of you are very familiar with. So Diana has over 20 years of Capitol Hill experience. She's worked for both the House Foreign Affairs Committee and the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, among other offices. She has worked for USAID's Office of Transition Initiatives, Interaction, and consulted for numerous NGOs and foundations. So I knew of Diana Obam years before she joined FCNL. I had never met her, but her name was referenced all the time when I was at Bread for the World. Everyone seemed to be meeting with her and seeking her advice and counsel. She was at the center of efforts to reform U.S. foreign assistance, something that Bread was very focused on. So I was so excited when she came to FCNL, and I actually got the chance to finally work with her myself. And now, as some of you may have heard, Diana will be retiring in January from FCNL. And she is leaving such a legacy for this organization. Now, of course, her dismantling racism and militarism work, that is something we are so excited to be able to continue and looking to connect it with more advocacy teams. And she's really played such a pivotal role in strengthening FCNL's foreign policy team. She is an incredible colleague to work with. Her vibrant passion and enthusiasm show through in everything she does. Anyone who knows her knows that Diana always gives 110% of herself. She gives the most thoughtful, honest, and useful feedback. She is strategic and she is skilled at balancing the practical with the prophetic, something that is essential in faith-based advocacy. She is a true champion and cheerleader for her colleagues and always has smart ideas about ways to improve what we do. She cares so deeply about her coworkers and her team. Working with Diana has made me a better lobbyist, a better manager, and a better colleague. So with that, it is my huge, huge privilege to introduce Diana Obam.
Thanks so much, everyone, and good evening. It's so great to see your faces from up here. I've been at all the tables, being next to you, and it's a whole different vision from here. And I see what everybody's been saying about not being able to see what they're reading. So let's see how this goes. So each year, the Friends Committee on National Legislation honors a member of Congress with the Edward F. Snyder Award for National Legislative Leadership in Advancing Disarmament and Building Peace. Now, many of you probably remember Ed Snyder, who served as FCNL's executive secretary from 1962 to 1990. He was a tireless advocate for peace, civil rights, and economic justice, whose ideas and ideals continue to guide us today. I am particularly inspired by one of the lessons he shared on his 90th birthday, which was that fear is a great motivator, but hope is essential to bring right action. So tonight, I am delighted to present the Edward F. Snyder Award to someone who continues to give us hope by taking right action, Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia. We honor him in particular for his leadership in reasserting Congress's constitutional power over matters of war. Senator Kaine has made reclaiming congressional war powers a signature issue during his time in the Senate. Ever since he was elected in 2012, Senator Kaine has worked tirelessly to ensure that Congress lives up to its responsibilities under the Constitution to decide if and when our nation goes to war. He has made diplomacy and human rights central parts of his agenda. We at FCNL have had the privilege of collaborating with Senator Kaine and his staff on several different war powers issues. Two of the most important have been Senator Kaine's war powers resolution to prevent further escalation of hostilities against Iran, and his bipartisan bill to repeal two authorizations for use of military force, known as AUMFs, one from 2002 for the war against Iraq, and another from the 1991 Gulf War. Over the last 2 decades, Congress all too often has avoided making the hard decisions on military action, leaving those up to the executive branch. And presidents on both sides of the aisle have stretched the 2002 Iraq War authorization far beyond its original intent to apply to operations that members of Congress never intended. For example, in January 2020, President Trump used this law to justify the assassination of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. And in response, Senator Kaine introduced a resolution to prohibit further hostilities against Iran, which won a majority of votes in both chambers of Congress on a bipartisan basis. And the following year, Senator Kaine reintroduced his bipartisan bill to repeal both the 2002 and 1991 AUMFs against Iraq. As a result of Senator Kaine's work with his Republican colleague and lead co-sponsor, Todd Young, who received this award last year, Congress is now closer than ever to finally repealing the 2002 Iraq AUMF. The bill to repeal this law advanced through the Senate Foreign Relations Committee on a bipartisan basis and currently has 51 co-sponsors, including 11 Republicans. Through Senator Kaine's persistent leadership, bipartisan majorities in both chambers of Congress now support repealing this outdated and dangerous law that is susceptible to further abuse. Senator Kaine has also pursued many other efforts to prevent executive branch overreach and to reassert congressional war powers. He is the true leader in the Senate on the effort to restore congressional war powers and ensure that these momentous decisions are in the hands of the representatives of the American people, not one person in the Oval Office. All of us who seek a world free of war and the threat of war are heartened by the presence of such principled and courageous allies in Congress. We present the Edward Snyder Peace Award to Senator Kaine this evening for all he has accomplished. We are grateful for his continuing commitment to a world where human rights are protected, diplomatic solutions are prioritized, and congressional authority for declaring war is restored. And now we can roll the video from Senator Kaine.
Hey everybody, Senator Tim Kaine here. I am truly honored to be selected as this year's recipient of the Friends Committee on National Legislation's Edward F. Snyder Award that annually highlights one member of Congress working toward the advancement of peace. Advancing peace sounds like a simple concept. Who wouldn't be for peace? Who would support a needless war? But the reality is much more complex because peace takes work, takes elbow grease. Peace means creating strong democratic institutions and prioritizing human rights. I remember hearing President Santos of Colombia at the time he brokered a peace deal between the Colombian government and the FARC, putting an end to a civil war that had lasted for decades, saying it's one thing to end a war, it's much harder to then build a peace. And I've always remembered the wisdom in that statement that he made. So what peace building means is you got to put diplomacy first. You have to empower diplomats to resolve crises and conflicts before they start. We have to ensure that authoritarian and despotic regimes don't have access to the weapons that they use to commit violence against their own people and against other sovereign nations. Peace requires vigilance. It requires groups like FCNL to keep lawmakers like me and my colleagues honest and accountable. We have to stay clear-eyed. Sometimes I believe the use or threat of military force is necessary and unavoidable to protect vulnerable people. But decisions as important as whether to abandon diplomacy or send service member into harm's way warrant careful deliberation and consensus. In the United States, that's why our founders gave Congress, rather than the executive, the power to formally declare and end wars. Throughout my 10-year career in the Senate, I've worked hard to ensure that Congress once again assumes and asserts its responsibility to provide oversight over military action. In a practical sense, this means conducting rigorous oversight of the use of force and repealing authorizations for the use of military force that are obsolete or subject to abuse. Congress's role in these decisions is vital, and too often Congress has abdicated its responsibility to take this matter with the gravity that it deserves. We owe nothing less to our nation's service members, diplomats, and their families who put themselves in harm's way on our behalf. In fact, I would view it as the pinnacle of public immorality for Congress to allow a war to proceed without having the guts to vote on whether the military action is within the national interest. We shouldn't be starting military action without votes of Congress. We shouldn't outsource our responsibility and let a president do it on his or her own without our putting our thumbprint on a mission and saying it's in the national interest. And if we're unwilling to do that, we shouldn't order men and women to risk their lives, their health, the lives of their colleagues and friends in military action. Edward Snyder embodied these very ideals. He was a tireless advocate for peace, for nuclear disarmament, with deep convictions about peace and justice and the connections between peace and justice. So I am honored, and I want to thank you for presenting me with this humbling award named after a remarkable man. I'm sorry I can't be with you tonight to celebrate FCNL and Mr. Snyder's legacy, but I wish you all the best as you conclude this year's annual meeting. I walk by your office every day. You play a powerful, powerful witness in the Senate and on Capitol Hill, so keep it up, and I look forward to continuing to collaborate with all of you.